Chapter 7. Power Up. Finally, a bit over a week later, Kamukura-kun decided she was vaccinated enough to go outside. Chiaki was practically bouncing in her chair as he opened the front door, one hand on her wheelchair's handles. The door swung outwards, she grimaced, and squeezed her eyes shut, not having seen natural light in almost a year now. When she thought it was safe to open them again, she did. And the smile slipped off her face. The sky instantly captured her attention. Instead of being clear blue or overcast gray, it was a deep crimson, with darker shades indicating clouds. She stared at it, horrifically mesmerized for a few moments, before her eyes turned to the landscape. There weren't any other visible buildings, but then again the wall completely encircling the house might have hidden them. The air was chilly and thin. They must be in a high area. Some sort of mountain retreat, maybe. The grass certainly looked healthy, if a bit less green than it should be at the tail end of summer.
I suppose this is why you kept the window shut?
She murmured, eyes unconsciously returning to that foreign sky as though hoping it'd go back to the one she knew.
To not alarm me?
Correct. He carefully maneuvered her wheelchair down the front steps. The wheels hit the sidewalk pavement with a heavy clunk. Now that she was actually outside, Chiaki wasn't quite sure what to do. Look around more, maybe? Exploring was usually a safe choice in open-world games.
Can we go outside that wall?
In response, he began pushing her in the wall's direction. Chiaki strained her ears for sounds of life, but there were none.
No birds singing in the trees, no planes flying overhead, no buzzing of the morning cicadas. It was completely silent, like the aftermath of a battle in movies, and she was just starting to notice some smell in the air, something faint but unpleasant. Oily, kind of.
They reached the wall. It was high, taller than them, and made of stone. It would have been normal, but along the top she could see turrets. Sentry turrets, Kamukura-kun had explained earlier, when he'd asked her to wait while he disabled them. She'd been shocked he would have such things, and that was the point he'd mentioned, almost offhandedly. There were other traps that he would have to physically disarm too. The world is not kind, and there are people who would attempt to kill you just for being well off, he'd said when she asked if they were really necessary. There are times I have been required to leave this facility, and without these traps and the wall, you would be completely unprotected. It is a simple matter for me to evade them when I leave, but you lack that luxury. He'd then warned that she should never attempt to go outside without alerting him. Not that she planned to. She wasn't a prisoner, and really, doing that in this apocalyptic world would just be stupid. The turrets looked like something out of a military game, she thought as he pushed her wheelchair through the gate, though she couldn't be sure if they were par the norm or advanced. Had Kamukura-kun made them himself, or stolen them? What about the other traps? With his skill set, either was equally likely.
Outside the walls, she saw that she was right on both her guesses. They were in a high area, and it had been some sort of retreat, for when she looked up and back, she saw mountains rising behind them. A road winded down to the valley below, where she could see rooftops. So they were maybe halfway up, and down there must be the settlement Kamukura-kun spoke of. The visible trees still looked in good condition, their green leaves valiantly clinging to the branches despite both the pollution and the approaching fall. It would have been a beautiful view if it weren't for the sky. They stayed outside for a good 20 minutes, him mostly just pushing her around and letting her familiarize herself with their location. There wasn't much to see. Isolated as they were, they didn't pass so much as a single person. The nature was beautiful, but it was hard to appreciate it when the sky was a constant reminder of how wrong the world was.
It didn't take long for Chiaki to request to go back inside.
Maybe another time she'd ask to visit the town, but she'd had enough for one day.
That girl's kinda weird, don't you think? I mean, you never see her do anything but play on those consoles all day.
Yeah, tell me about it. Who spends that much time on video games?
Only dumb gamer nerds.
And people too stuck up to socialize. Have you seen her parents' home? Rich kids always think they're too good for us.
As she passed the gossiping students, she hunched her shoulders and peered at her screen harder, as if the bright colors could block out what they were saying. She'd thought the words would have stopped stinging by now, but they hadn't. They were wrong about her being stuck up, she wanted to say. She'd gladly talk to them if she could, but she didn't know how. All the girls her age wanted to talk about were idols and fashion and stuff she had no interest in, and all the boys scoffed at the idea of playing games with a girl. There was just no way to connect her world to theirs. Really, though, it was fine, she told herself. If the loneliness ever got too strong, she'd just ask her parents for more games to distract herself with. Once she'd have asked for their company, but she'd learned long ago they just didn't have the time for that. So she settled for presents. The pink-haired girl sighed, one hand leaving the console to hitch her slipping backpack further up her shoulder. Her feet mindlessly followed the trail to her homeroom, her eyes trained on her game. People milled around her, faceless students in a faceless crowd. It was just another ordinary day at high school. As such, she was completely unprepared for the floor to disappear from under her. It was so sudden she didn't even have time to scream. One second she was approaching the door to class, the next her foot was passing through the floor, and she was falling. She hit the ground with a grunt, the console flying out of her hands and disappearing into darkness. Her limbs ached from the impact. Raising her head, she saw that she was in some kind of medieval hallway, someplace stone and dark and cold. There were monitors stuck anachronistically to the walls, glowing bright in the gloom, but the image on them was distorted by static. As she tried to figure out how she got here, wasn't she walking to class a minute ago? A voice spoke, feminine and soft and wrong, echoing everywhere around her.
Run, class rep! Let's see how far you get!
Chiaki started awake with a quiet little gasp, her heart running rabbit-like in her chest and cold sweat clinging to her skin. Tile. She was looking at white tile ceiling, not shadowy hallways. She was in her bed, safe. Her heartbeat slowed, and she let out a sigh of relief. The ultimate gamer wiped the sweat away and yawned. It had been a while since she'd dreamed about her old high school. Her memories of that lonely time were ones she preferred not to look at, and her brain was usually willing to cooperate, feeding her pleasant dreams of playing with her friends instead. But that last part, what had that last part been? She frowned, but in the way of all dreams, it was disappearing in the daylight. She was scared, she remembered that much.
Must have been a nightmare.
Rubbing the sleep crust out of her eyes with one hand, Chiaki groped blindly for the cane Kamakura-kun had given her with the other. It was right within arm's reach of her bed, and once she had it, she used it to help her stand up, legs shaking a little as she did so. As the days turned to weeks, her progress on walking became slow but steady. She'd gradually built up how much she could walk with the cane, but it wore her out so much. The wheelchair was still her primary form of travel. She barely crossed the distance to her dresser before she had to stop and sit down to wait for Kamakura-kun. That was fine, since she couldn't manage stairs anyway. Chiaki did not like imagining having to learn how to walk up and down those again. Despite the odd dream, the day was rather ordinary. Therapy progressed as usual, with small improvements on her end. Lunch she practiced eating on her own, and she managed to feed herself a few bites before the chopsticks fell out of her shaking grip and Kamakura-kun took over. It wasn't until the afternoon that anything notable really happened.